Okay, so I was assigned the first chapter and its differences and similarities, and the topic I chose to talk about was the gender pay gap. Okay, so the first article I read was by Craig and Wire, and it just kind of highlighted that on average in 2021, which is this year, women make 82 cents for every $1 a man makes, which is an 18% gender pay. Um, which is like on average in the United States, women would have to work 3 more months than a man to make the exact same amount of money. Um, I also found that if our qualifications were equal, um, a woman in the same role as a man would still make two. So if you had women that had the same background and men that had the same background, we would still make less. Um, but the verbiage in this article was just a little odd and didn't really point out the problem as much as I thought they might. Also, they came up with a statistic for us in this article that women make up 8% of CEOs in Fortune 500 companies in 2021, and this is a record high. And I was like, oh, record high. And then I went back and I was like, wait, 8%, that's would be the record low. So I found that really interesting. I also didn't stick it on the slide, but they did a study with about 235 people, both men and women, and statistically, men were more likely to choose a leadership role where it was winner take all for the leader, and women were more likely to choose a position where the earnings could be divvied out by the leadership's wants, essentially. In the Futurity article, um, they also did the 18% less than men figure, but I found it interesting that um, there is a state where the gender pay gap is 35%, and in 31 out of 51 states and provinces in the US, it's equal to or more than 20% of a gender pay gap. Vermont actually has the lowest gender wage gap, and that's 9%, which if you compared it to a man working all year and getting paid, that would be the equivalent of um, me working until the first week of November, and then I just stopped getting paid, even though I was still doing the work. In comparison, Futurity kind of focus on the work that women essentially do for free, um, and then it gives statistics on a state by state basis, but then shows specific salaries and by gender, which I thought was interesting. And then in the Craig and Wire, it just kind of highlights the increased work that women do just to make what men do. But they did have a study which I thought was nice, and it was randomized. They also offered a solution and some like possible reasons behind the pay gap. The solution was maybe picking women for leadership roles because it would kind of reform the social stratification, which we'll talk about in the next slide. Although I didn't really like the verbiage in the Craig and Wire because I felt like it was bragging about like the record high and some movements we've made forward recently, even though the movements were fairly small. I did relate it to the text in chapter one because scribe status, so what we were born with or what we like naturally fall into. So just because we're born women or identify as women, we're automatically behind the eight ball on our salaries, which kind of seems like baloney to me. But what about women that are like black or Hispanic or they don't speak English as their native language or other things? So then you're just kind of stacking the against them. The social strata. So we talked about stratas in the first chapter. So you have this group of people, this group of people, and this group of people. Well, men are always on top in our society. Prestigious jobs are up high, and then down lower is a little bit different. So we have a structured, functional society where some jobs just make more than others, even though you might not need education. Um, and men typically get the structure at the top end. And then also the feminist view. Men use their power roles to control the situations and to keep women out of those positions. They also have the majority of all important social structure leadership, like economy and politics. Um, and the feminist view in chapter one can talk about that really well, that I liked. So some of my thoughts are the gender pay gap is just brushed under the rug by people in power, which are mostly men, and we normally, as women, don't have the same influence in men, even though we might have a similar role. So while somebody might be a president of this and then a man's a president of the other, the man's probably going to have a little bit more influence. And then tradition and gender roles just play such a huge role in how much money we make, um, like in the social stratification of nursing or teaching. So some thoughts I have for our discussion are what can we do to close the gender pay gap? Are there instances where like men are just naturally better suited for jobs, or is it just a personal level? My opinion is it's just a personal level, but that's a good option for us to talk about. And then I don't know if we can see. I'll try to drag this up here. But why do tradition and gender roles play such a large part in our compensation of doing the same work? Like in nursing or teaching, um, men work in that now, but do they not get paid as well because it's naturally a woman's job? So those are just some of the questions. But thanks for listening.